I'm from West Virginia, and I moved all the way to Lexington, Kentucky for a girl. Now that might be, well, the scariest part of the story, that a dude from West Virginia moved over the border to Kentucky, and only for a girl, but I assure you, it gets worse. A lot worse. She was super affectionate when we first got together, like I couldn't have wished for a better girlfriend. But as time went on, and we got more secure in the whole thing, that affection dropped off to next to nothing. It was a slow process, almost like a leaky bucket or something. I barely noticed the relationship dropping off bit by bit until one day, I just realized that there was nothing left of us. We were like roommates more than anything, hardly spent any time together. Didn't actually get intimate for like months at a time. And in the end, sleeping in the same bed as her was so depressing that I ended up just staying on the couch. Not long after I started calling the couch my bed, we broke up formally. It sucked. But I saw it coming a long way off, and it wasn't entirely unwelcome. And that's when I started talking to this girl on Reddit. Now I should make it perfectly clear that I was never ever unfaithful to my girlfriend. Only when we broke up. I was so starved for affection and female attention that I looked forward to wherever I could. I wasn't confident for dating apps, I don't think so. Reddit's anonymity suited me just fine. Eventually me and this girl that I met on the AR/gaming sub swapped numbers and actually started planning to meet. She lived over in Arizona, but flying down there to meet her didn't seem like a big deal at all. Not when she was so nice and pretty, too. I remember staying up super late talking to her one night, trying to keep my voice down so X wouldn't hear. We planned all the stuff we do together, all the places that she takes me in Phoenix, on the bomb Mexican food we were going to eat. I was excited. And I went to sleep smiling. But I shared and wake up that way. I woke up to loud crashing noises, just feet away from me in the TV room. At first, I thought it was a home invasion or something. But when I looked around, it was her, my ex. And she was smashing my Xbox with a baseball bat over and over again. I screamed at her, asking her what she thought she was doing, then went to grab my phone so I could call the cops. Only it wasn't on the coffee table where I usually put it on charge every night. It was nowhere to be seen. That's when my ex started ranting about how I'd been cheating, how she knew everything. And then mentioned the Reddit girl by name. Before she swung at me with the baseball bat. I fell backwards over the couch trying to avoid the strike. And I did, but Jesus Christ, the whole rush of errors that went past my face just about put the fear of God into me. She chased me around the apartment, swinging that bat as hard as she could until I locked myself in our bathroom. I thought I might be able to reason with her from the other side of the door, to be able to actually explain that the Redditor was someone I started talking to after we broke up. But she actually tried to bash the door down. And I'm still amazed that she didn't manage it. Like it was legit, like that scene from The Shining. She bashed a hole in one of the wood panels and proceeded to scream through that. Thank God it wasn't big enough for her to reach through and unlock the door. Otherwise, I'd have been in some serious trouble. Eventually she calmed down enough to stop trying to kill me, but she wanted me out of the apartment. Like that night. I didn't even gather everything up. I just threw some essentials into a bag and got out of there. I kept imagining her sneaking up with a kitchen knife or something, catching me off guard, and then just stabbing me to death or something. I've had friends ask me why I didn't just restrain her. Why I was so scared of a girl. But that's about the dumbest response I've ever had to this whole story. A swing from that bat where a stab wound in the right place. It wouldn't have mattered what was or wasn't dangling between a person's legs. I'd been dead as a doornail. I got out of there pretty fast and drove to a motel, then tried and failed to sleep through the rest of the night. The next morning I called my mom in West Virginia, told her everything and arranged to stay with her for a little while until I could get back on my feet and have gone back to the apartment to get the rest of my things if I didn't think that she'd either smashed or burned everything I owned. Besides, I was just happier to be out of there by that point. And I'll tell you another thing. I have never ever been back to Kentucky since then. Oh, wait until Tyler Chowders comes back round Virgie, rather than bring up all those bad memories. Almost 10 years ago now, in a college down in Florida, when I get a call from my ex-girlfriend, who had only broken up with like 6 months previously. I didn't recognize the number at first, as I'd switched cell phone carriers not long prior. I've never been one to answer calls from unknown numbers. But since I was in college, I used to get calls from professors, people over at Financial People inviting me to D&D games and dorms and stuff like that. So I kind of nervously answered, just sort of hoping it was going to be about something good. I recognize the voice immediately. And as soon as I do, my heart just sinks. There was a reason I hadn't given her my new number, and I wondered just how she'd gotten a hold of it. She's all like, "We need to talk." To which I replied that I'm not sure we really do. That had been like 6 months, and I thought we were out of each other's lives. She was bonds with like, "Now, we really, really need to talk. Are you sitting down, because I have something to tell you." She's pregnant. That was my initial thought. And I won't lie. I did feel myself getting weak in the knees. So I sit down on my bed, feeling my heart racing in my chest and my hands getting clammy, getting ready to hear the bad news. We got a patient in the ER from a car accident. And she didn't make it. I'm so sorry. But it was your mom. Now my ex worked as an emergency room nurse, and getting the news like that absolutely destroyed me. I was just in shock. For some reason. I tried calling herself, but she didn't pick up a call she didn't pick up. So I hung up the call my little brother and given the news. We cried like babies as I told him everything. How my ex had given me the news ahead of time, how she wasn't answering her phone, all that stuff. He confirmed that she'd driven over to Walmart like an hour or so ago and lamented not making the most of his last goodbye with her. Then, in the middle of us having some real heart-to-heart, I hear him just shout, "Mom," out of nowhere. She wasn't dead. She just walked through the door. Super confused as to what was going on. Long story short, my ex had lied. And she did so because she wanted to hurt me, quote, just like I'd hurt her. This is about the point I tell you that I cheated on her with a girl in college, but was at least a man enough to admit it and have her break up with me. I'm not saying I didn't deserve some kind of revenge, but, dear God, not that brutal. Ex-boyfriends can be terrible, sure, but some ex-girlfriends can be absolute psychos. On July 28, 1977, Travis Victor Alexander was born in Riverside, California, the son of Gary and Pamela Alexander. Travis's early years were marred by tragedy at age 11, and unstable and ultimately toxic home life meant that Travis would be forced to go and live with his paternal grandparents. And after his father's tragic death in mid-1997, he was followed by his 7 brothers and sisters. Despite his rough upbringing, Trav has performed rather well in school, attending college and eventually getting a job with a company known as Prepaid Legal Services as a salesman, and later as the company's motivational speaker, a position that paid considerably better. As part of his job at PPL, Travis would often attend conferences that took place in Las Vegas, plying his trade as a motivational speaker in front of audiences of hundreds. During one such conference in September of 2006, there was one particular woman in the audience who was enraptured by Travis's charisma and his talent for public speaking. She approached him afterwards, introducing herself and striking up a conversation that would spark off a long-term friendship. This woman's name was Jodi Arias. Jodi and Arias was born on July 9, 1980, in Salinas, California, to a mother of European ancestry and a father of Mexican ancestry. After she met Travis at the PPL conference, the parent group increasingly close, which led to Jodi converting to Mormonism just 2 months later, actually being baptized by Travis himself at a ceremony that took place in Southern California. Despite the distance between them, the pair of them began dating a few months later, and Jody even took the steps to move to Mesa and then Yreka, California, living in her grandparents' place so she could be closer to Travis. Travis and Jody had a tumultuous on and off again relationship for almost a year and a half, often forced to maintain a long-distance relationship, due to the fact that one of them lived in Arizona, while the other one had to remain in California for work. This kind of distance will put a strain on any relationship, but it appeared there were other factors at work that made Jody and Travis's relationship less than healthy. From the very first time that Travis introduced Jody to his close friends, they seemed to take an instant dislike to her. God didn't seem in the least bit keen to impress or ingratiate herself to them, seeming genuinely disinterested in anyone but Travis. His friends detected a kind of jealousy to her how she seemed to act overly possessive of Travis yet at the same time, didn't seem to show him much affection either. From the get-go, they found Jody's behavior worrying, even frightening. Shortly after Jody moved into her grandparents' home in Yreka, she and Travis arranged to accompany one another on a week-long work-related trip to Cancun down in Mexico. The trip was scheduled for June 15th, and the couple intended to make something of a vacation out of it. However, not long after, Travis reportedly went to company HQ to request that his travel companion be changed to another member of the sales team. There has been much speculation regarding why exactly this is, but our best guess is to assume that involves a breakdown in his and Jody's relationship. Then on May 28th, Jody called Travis in a state of distress. She told him there had been a burglary at her grandparents' place where she was staying, and felt so unsafe that she begged to come and stay with him for a while. The burglars had apparently stolen a number of valuable items during the break-in, but perhaps the most significant was a .25 caliber Colt pistol which had belonged to her grandfather. Police had no luck finding the perpetrators, and eventually gave up looking altogether as they couldn't seem to find a single shred of evidence that might give them a clue to the identity of any of the people involved. In the face of God begging to stay with him, Travis straight up refused. This is perhaps the best evidence we have that their pair had broken up by that point. If Travis loved her or had any feelings at all for her, surely he would have offered her a place to stay. Only he didn't. Or maybe it was the case that Travis did love her, but something else was stopping him from inviting her over. It's possible that there have been many another woman in Travis's life. However, it's also possible that Travis didn't invite Jody over because he was afraid of her. Jody called Travis yet again on June 2nd, repeatedly attempting to reach him between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. But her cell phone records show that since the longest call was a mere 17 seconds, he apparently didn't pick up the phone. Then just after 3 in the morning, Travis called Jody back, and the pair engaged in a lengthy conversation. We have no idea what was said during the call, but we do know that at around 5:30 that same morning, Jody drove over to a car rental place over in Redding, California, entering the business shortly after it opened at 8 a.m. She told the clerk that she wished to use the car for the long drive to Utah for a work-related trip, and then drove it to visit a few friends on her way to Utah, where she would meet up with a fellow PPL employee by the name of Ryan Burns. Yet Jody didn't show up to meet Ryan until late in the evening on June 3rd, leaving a sizable amount of time to be accounted for that day. And when she did show up in the West Jordan suburb of Salt Lake City to meet up with Ryan Burns, her colleague noticed some unusual things about her. Firstly, he saw that her normally dyed blonde hair was now brown, but not its natural shade of brown, and that she seemed to have cuts or scratches all over her hands. Jody also refused to let him near the rental car, insisting that they take his car to the PPL business conference. Naturally, Ryan thought this behavior was unusual, but the pair had more important things to think about, as the conference would keep each of them occupied for the majority of the day. Ryan had another reason to keep quiet about such unusual behavior. And that's because he and Jody had begun something of a love affair during their time in Utah, with the two spending several hours hugging and kissing on a large beanbag chair at the place that they were staying. Jody also reassured him about the cuts on her hands by telling him that she had gotten them while working part-time at a Mexican restaurant in the Yreka area, an excuse that seemed good enough for him to quiet his suspicions. Once their business was adjourned, Jody departed from Salt Lake City on June the 6th, driving back westward towards California. Her cell phone records show that she attempted to call Travis several times, leaving a handful of voicemails. She apparently also found a way to access this voicemail system. Why exactly she chose to do so is still a matter of conjecture. But we can all agree that it constitutes some rather unusual behavior. When she returned the rental car to the outlet and reading, the clerk began to inspect the interior as a matter of routine. It is then that he to notice something unusual. The vehicle was missing its floor mats on the driver and passenger side. There were also some kind of stains on the upholstery, as if some thick liquid had been spilled and then left to dry. However, since the upholstery was black, and the color of said liquid was not visible, no suspicions were raised among the staff of the car rental outlet, and the interior was cleaned before it could be inspected by anyone of any importance. Meanwhile, a few days prior, Travis's employers had tried to contact him for a conference call, only to have their calls unanswered. The same pattern repeated itself for a few days, with friends and colleagues calling only for Travis to not pick up his phone. By June 9th, as a handful of Travis's friends are beginning to worry amongst themselves regarding his well-being, they agreed to go over to his home to check up on him. They spoke to a few of the other tenants who lived in the same building as Travis did, and found that they had not seen him in a few days. But since he traveled for work frequently, they didn't seem to think that there was anything to worry about. However, Travis's neighbors was in possession of a spare key to his apartment, which Travis has entrusted them with on the off chance he should ever lose his keys. The concerned group of friends proceeded to unlock the door to Travis's apartment, calling out his name as they entered. Then one of them froze with a sharp gasp, pointing to a pool of congealed blood that sat in the hallway and Travis's bedroom. In a panic, they began to search the apartment for him, eventually being greeted by the sight of his days-old corpse, which was lying in the bathtub, covered in blood. His friends cried and screamed as they called 911. But they did not attempt to revive him, as it was obvious from the state of his dead body that he had been deceased for a while. During the 911 call that followed the discovery, a police dispatcher asked if Travis had potentially thought about ending his own life, or if his friends knew of anyone who may have been threatening his life. His friends immediately mentioned Jody Arias, his ex-girlfriend, as a possible suspect in his murder. He said that in the days prior to his death, Travis had mentioned that Jody had been stalking him, accusing him of seeing someone else, and seemed to be in some kind of jealous rage. This psychopathic jealousy had led her to begin attempting to access his Facebook account, and even going so far as slashing his car's tires. When investigating police arrived at Travis's home, they commenced an intense search for any evidence or clues as to the identity of his killer. One of the most curious things they discovered was a recently purchased digital camera in the washing machine. Despite a large amount of water damage, police were able to recover the camera's memory card and found on it a number of photographs which someone had apparently attempted to delete. These photographs showed Travis and Jody in numerous suggestive poses, taken on the afternoon of June 4th. The final photograph in the series was taken at 5:39 p.m. that same day and showed Travis alive and well while he was taking a shower. In it, he was smiling playfully, completely naked. A candid depiction of the man's final moments, as another photograph, taken just minutes later, showed Travis bleeding profusely while lying on the bathroom floor. DNA samples were taken from bloody handprints found in the bathroom, which gave police all the evidence they needed to arrest a suspect, as they contain not only Travis's DNA, but Jody Arias has to. After being indicted for first-degree murder by a grand jury in Maricopa County, Jody was arrested at her home in California, and then extradited to Arizona on September 5, 2008. Less than a week later, she pled not guilty, giving several different accounts of her alleged involvement in Travis's death. At first, she told investigating police officers that she was nowhere near Arizona on the day her ex-boyfriend was murdered. Then, after pressure from the cops, she admitted she was present at the time of his death. But that had involved a home invasion, whereby two individuals broke into Travis's residence before killing him and attacking her in turn. 2 years of investigation later, Jody then changed her story entirely, telling the police that she had indeed killed Travis, but had only done so in self-defense. She spun a tale of brutal domestic violence, how she was a victim of a cruel and violent man, and how she regularly feared for her life around him. At her trial in February of 2013, Jody told the jury that she had been physically and emotionally abused by her parents, and that her life with Travis had echoed that same cycle of abuse and guardianship, one that she wanted to escape from, but couldn't quite bring herself to. She went on to describe the abusive type of life that Travis subjected her to, one that included a great deal of BDSM and other painful acts, most of which were in direct violation of the Mormon rules regarding such things. Jody also had recorded a phone conversation that she had with Travis, one that she used as evidence to prove that at one point, Travis had wanted to use zip ties to tie her to a tree while she was dressed as Little Red Riding Hood. Jody has heard respond enthusiastically on the phone, but told the court it was all an act, that the idea terrified her, and was typical of the kinds of things that Travis wanted to do. Jody also mentioned that Travis had admitted to find underage children attractive, basically painting him to be a complete monster. However, the prosecution argued that Jody was a vengeful, vindictive person who had only recorded the phone conversation in an attempt to blackmail Travis and embarrass him in front of his Mormon peers. The prosecution also questioned the forensic expert before the jury, prompting them to say that there had been a thorough examination of Travis's computer, one in which absolutely had no evidence of child pictures found, nor were there any references to anything intimate with children. Rebuttal witnesses from the prosecution also included several Travis's other girlfriends, who stated he never exhibited any problems with anger or violence. Clinical psychologist Janine Morthy testified for the prosecution, stating that she found no evidence that Travis had ever abused Jody. They also said that Jody suffered from borderline personality disorder, showing signs of immaturity and an unstable sense of identity. The final nail in Jody's legal coffin was the prosecution telling the jury that a single .25 caliber bullet casing was found near Travis's body. The same caliber the gun that was stolen from our grandparents' place just a week before the murder. As it turns out, Jody had faked the entire burglary just to obtain the murder weapon, which not only show that she was a dangerous psychopath, willing to hurt those close to her to achieve her goals, but that she had actually been planning to kill Travis for quite some time after the trial that had reportedly cost the U.S. taxpayer over $3 million. The jury found Jody guilty of first-degree murder, and she only narrowly avoided the death penalty when a judge essentially took pity on her mental illness, sentencing her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. She was also ordered to pay Travis's siblings over $30,000 in damages. As of 2016, Jody is housed at Arizona State Prison Complex, Perryville, and her case and trial have been the subject of a great deal of social media interest, with even Donald Trump commenting on what he called her obvious guilt. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the whole sort of drama is that Travis may well have genuinely believed that he had found the love of his life, and how in searching for the fairy tale romance that all people want deep down, he found the polar opposite, a living nightmare that would end in him losing his life to someone who could fairly be described as a conniving, violent, psychopathic predator. Relationships break down all the time, for a variety of reasons. People hurt, people cry, the most ultimately move on and find someone else. God took that chance away from Travis in a horribly callous and bloody manner. Instead of letting Travis go, she dragged him down like a sinking ship, one which neither of them will ever emerge from intact.